put two of them down at one time. That means it's recording.
Right. Just backtrack a little.
Yeah.
You were talking about the fact that it was a body of work over a 2-year period. We discussed the fact that one doesn't appreciate at that time what it is that one is doing and how valuable that work is.
Particularly, I didn't appreciate it because I thought it was just temporary until I made another step up the ladder, which would be cinematography, or if you skipped that, then you became an assistant director or something, and then worked until you became a director. Like many of the directors at Metro came from assistant directors, which nowadays isn't quite as true. They remain assistant directors all their lives. It's a career. Well,
you were talking about Shirley Temple having married John Agar.
Yeah, I don't know whether she was kind of coerced into that or not, but that didn't mean that when I saw her and saw them together, they were working in this picture. They were very lovey-dovey and looked very happy. I don't know what happened later on, but evidently didn't pan out too well. But she was a quiet little gal. I didn't know her when she was the tap dancing Shirley.
The Moppet.
I thought she was pretty clever to be able to carry a tune and tap dance at the same time,
Oh, she was totally enchanting.
Yeah,
she absolutely captured everybody's heart.
And when
it didn't work as she got older.
Yeah, but in this picture, she's got a certain charm, and then shortly after that, she did the the radio series. I forgot the name of it, but something about Sweet 16 or terrible not to remember the name of that, because we had to photograph her quite often. Whenever they needed a picture for Radio Guide, we had to do a new sitting on her. But she was quiet and unassuming, and evidently is very talented and very intelligent, which is the important thing, I think. A lot of the actresses nowadays, I notice, are able to be interviewed and sound pretty intelligent, which a lot of them in those days, during the Betty Grable period, sometimes sounded a little inane, They, I think, were more of a manufactured type.
You call it the Betty Grable period. Are we to imply that she wasn't terribly bright? Or?
Well, she didn't try to espouse any great theories or thoughts or anything. She was just happy going along with being a movie star. And of course, I talked to her before she ever, had that big break at Fox. The things at Metro were just little bit parts, so it's hard to tell what happened later. But the picture of her that somebody snapped incidentally during the war has become very famous.
Yes, her looking over her shoulder with her legs together. Became, I guess, one of the great pin-ups of World War II.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Did you ever photograph any of those pin-up ladies? Rita?
No, I missed, but my assistant, Eric Carpenter, who's now gone, and I think was younger than I, and was my assistant for years. He worked for Clarence Bull, and then he worked for me, and I taught him a few things. We got him in the Union, and he went on to become quite a glamour photographer. So you'll be probably seeing shots by Eric Carpenter of Who's the Sweater Girl? That was, she thought.
Ann Sheridan?
Lana
Turner?
Lana Turner. He was her favorite photographer, turned out, So I was very happy with Eric Carpenter, because when he came to me, he was a cement man. He'd been doing plaster work. But he used to go out and pick up the props and take care of, be sure the wardrobe was delivered, and do all kinds of things that a photo assistant wouldn't really have to do. But he wanted to know the whole business. So as a result, after we got him in the Union, he just went great guns and did a lot.
That's a gratifying thing to do.
Yeah, right.
You've added.
I've had quite a few apprentices and helpers, and I felt sent them on their way, doing what I think is quite a noble thing. making people feel at ease and relaxed so that you could peek in on a little intimate part of their lives or souls or whatever it is. And they've all become quite, 3 or 4 of them have become quite successful.
I always find that there are certain people who, when you see them in person, none of that quality that you see on the screen comes across at all. It's as though the camera takes a special delight in making it all work. Can you remember stars like that?
Well, I think that that's what makes it difficult to find a star. That's because they don't present themselves right there on a platter for you. I don't, that was a beautiful part about MGM. L.B. Mayer knew that you didn't know that immediately, and he gave them time to nurture. He gave them time to develop. It was a family, really. Mm-hmm. It was MGM was the place to be. There's no doubt about it. Both for me, for photography, cinematographers too. They gave James Wong Howe a chance to develop into quite a cinematographer. Yes. He started as a portrait photographer, and he made a big mistake one day, and they fired him off the picture. But that didn't mean they fired him out of the studio. He was shooting a shot of the girl of the thin man, Myrna Loy, and he was doing something that was way in advance of what they were doing in those days. He was inventive, you see, and that's what made MGM what it was. The actors could invent and improvise and show what they had to offer, and he would allow them to develop. Well, to go back to the photography, James Wong was shooting this bedroom scene, and Myrna Loy comes into the bedroom with a beautiful satin negligee on. It was just magnificent. And they had to put a very deep makeup on Myrna Loy because of her freckles. It was like Crawford had to have a very deep pancake on. And
for the same reason?
Obviously before they invented pancake.
For the same reason?
For the same reason, Crawford was covered with freckles, terribly freckled. And you never realize that. There are a couple of shots of George Hurrell around that were taken without any retouching, and they're really classic because there she is in all her freckles. So anyway, here's this deep makeup on Myrna Loy coming into this kind of low-lit bedroom scene, and it's powdered down beautifully, and her hair is a kind of the same color. Her hair was a kind of a blondish, brunettish. And she walks in, and James Wong had lit the set with indirect lighting. They're using it bounce light all the time now, they call it. And here the lights all shot up on a sheet he stretched across the top of the set. And these lights bounce down in and make a beautiful glow in the room. Well, the film wasn't quite fast enough, and he didn't have a fast enough lens, didn't have a big enough opening, and Myrna Loy's gown absorbed every bit and reflected every bit of the down light. So here was a headless woman walking around the bedroom. All you could see was the negligee. Couldn't see her face at all. And her hair disappeared also, because it was the same color. James Wong Howe was doing something that every cinematographer does today with bounce light, to get a soft light spread all over the place, and no shadows. And he was at least 20 years ahead, and they fired him. They said, off the picture the next day. Well, he hung around sitting, I'll never forget, sitting in the camera room there for a couple of days until another picture started. But they said, none of that, no, But that was allowed. Mistakes were allowed. The director got you fired, but you got another picture right away. I suppose the same thing happens to portrait photographers. If Farlow hadn't liked me, I should have said forget it, and they'd put me back on stills. And, I'd still be at Metro. But that's how we got into that nurturing. And you ask, you can't tell whether they've got it or not until they step in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. It's like we all go to a party and we're all lively and our charm is all on and everything, and we come home and we slump in the chair and watch television, it's probably when the camera turns on you, you exude just that much that you don't otherwise. Or you keep it in reserve until that moment, maybe. Maybe that's the reason.
That's part of it, I think. I also think there must be something...
But you don't dig in. I don't put it that they're getting to the soul of the person. It's just an exterior thing that comes across. That's maybe the depth of the eyes, maybe what you're saying.
Yeah, I go along with that. I think it has more to do with both.
Yeah, I never said, I'm capturing your soul, Jesus, voodoo or something. But I try to get a third dimension. I have my lights very mobile. That's why when I'm shooting with strobe, you never quite know. You're doing that for another reason. Sinatra, I did a lot of strobe shooting with because he's moving all the time, or he was moving all the time. Nowadays he's slowing up a little, I think. But portraits of him, sometimes I had to use strobes to stop where he needs a thousandth of a second to stop him. Other people you can give a half a second exposure and get it. But with lighting, I keep the key light mobile. It's always on a fulcrum. It's always on a boom. As a matter of fact, when I was at Metro, they used to build all these special things for me. Anything I wanted of Harlow, if I'm shooting Harlow, anything I wanted, I got. With Sinatra, anything I wanted for photographs with Sinatra album covers or whatever I did for him, Frank wants it or Frank needs it or something, and it goes.
Who were you working for at that time when you did Sinatra?
I was under contract to Sinatra.
Tell me about that. How did that happen?
Well, at CBS, I'd photographed Frank in 1945 when he was the scrawny...
the Bobby Sox's Delight.
Yeah, Bobby Sox's Delight. They wanted to mother him. And so I dug up 5 beautiful gals around CBS there to surround him for a magazine cover. And when he left after the city, he took all the girls with him, didn't leave any for me. But I don't think he ever forgot that. But even so, I didn't see him then. He went off to Metro and did those pictures, and then, of course, the thing at Columbia when he made his comeback and all that. I didn't see him in all those years. And one day, a friend of mine, publicity man, called me and he said, hey, Sinatra's forming a company, and we need somebody like you to do everything. And you can do it. And this fella, I'd worked a half a day for him, this publicity man, months previously. I hadn't thought one second about the job I had done. I was disappointed because it was an action show, and portraits more to my liking. But I took out my trusty Nikon speed cameras with a motor drive and the whole thing, and captured a lot of stuff in that half a day that I might not have gotten had I been saying to somebody, I just want to sit around and do portraits. But that half a day's work caused him to call me and say Sinatra, and then he gave my name along with some other names to Frank, and then Frank said Ted Allan, So putting the finger like that was all he had to say, and they got Ted Allan, So it was a verbal contract for a couple of years, and then finally I was down in South America shooting some production stills and poster art on a picture called Taurus Bulba, made in Argentina. And that went on, and Frank wanted me for Manchurian Candidate. And so I wasn't through with Taurus Bulba, And so he got so mad, he said, when I want him, So he signed me to the contract. So then in between pictures, I did album covers and that sort of thing. Or shot Nancy's birthday party.
How long were you involved with that?
It was a total of 7 years, starting with X-15.
Was he a generous employer?
If you only could have one friend, I'd pick Frank Sinatra.
Really?
Yeah.
It's nice.
Because if you like it, if you're in, you're in. I went around the world, spent 3 months with him going around the world, And then when Jean's, my wife's birthday, I was saying, oh boy, I wish I were there. Jean's birthday is June the 2nd. We're in London. And what did he do but one day he said to me, he says, "Go down to the airport there," he says, "and get somebody, make sure they get back here to the hotel we're staying at, the, what the hell's the fancy...
Dorchester?
Huh?
The Dorchester?
No, the
Connaught?
on the river there.
In London?
Yeah,
The
Savoy. He said, make sure they get back to the Savoy. And I said, "Who's coming in?" He said, "Well, someone, but you'll know them when you see them. They'll be getting off the plane, you'll know." I went down, and my wife was getting off the plane, on her birthday. So we spent a lot of time in London there, and we went over to... Frank had his private plane there, his pilot and everything. So we flew. We didn't have to go through customs or anything, We went over to France and landed there, and we went down to the Riviera and to Cannes, and Gene had a wonderful time, So that's the kind of surprises he was doing. And every year he'd send me a Christmas tree with fully decorated of all things. The door would come with a Christmas tree with all the decorations on. Said one day, "You certainly saved me a lot of trouble because I hate decorating a Christmas tree." I would say he's been generous to all the people I know that he makes producers out of. He wanted to make me a producer, and I didn't push it, so I don't know why, because he turned right around and made Bill Daniels a producer that same month, and Bill produced a couple of pictures. Bill Daniels, the movie cameraman,
sure,
who was doing our pictures. And, it only, for Bill, I think it only meant that he got a little extra money, and because when you're a producer with Sinatra, he always had a line producer to do all the work, and he reserved, I guess, the right to make any changes or alterations in anything that happened.
What was the last year of your contract with Sinatra?
70-something.
Mm-hmm. You see him at all?
I haven't seen him since he's remarried, but he used to call me every once in a while. He wanted a shot to give to Groucho Marx, who just bought a yacht, and he wanted a picture in a captain's cap, yachting cap, to give to him. So I ran down to his place and did it just for kicks. And then he had this, like Edward G. Robinson, he had this beautiful gallery of these original paintings, beautiful stuff down at Palm Springs. And I went down and did color photographs of all these paintings, and then I blew them up to the size of the painting. And when he would lend one, he would stick my copy, color copy, up in its place.
That's a nice idea.
Yeah. Which was a hell of a, because the copies weren't any better, but they were just as good, and they looked, you'd have to go up and touch them to know that they were copies, because I gave a transparency to the printer so he could copy the color art. So stuff like that I carried on after we were through with our contract. But
where did you go after Sinatra?
I went back to making backstage films. See, I the last pictures I shot stills on Sinatra was called The Detective.
Oh, yes.
I've forgotten what year that was. But then I worked on these other pictures doing the TV 5-minute backstage, the fun and foibles of making movies. So I did about a dozen of those for various people, for Universal mostly. And that was a kick, because that got me back to my cinematography and sort of producing and directing. On Tora Tora, I did a half-hour film for that show. Story about the pilots and how they hired them and how they had to train them to fly the Japanese Zeros and the bombing planes that they used in Pearl Harbor. So that got me away from shooting anything more for Frank. I don't think I did any album covers after that. But it was a great joy, because it allowed me to go around the world in one trip for 3 months, and also every location was a delight. Imagine going to Hawaii for 6 months on None But the Brave, where he's directing it, you know. And we had a situation there where everybody thought he would stay up so late that he'd probably be dragging in 10, 11 to do his directing job, but boy, he was up till 4 or 5 in the morning telling stories to all of us, but he was there before anyone of the crew was there in the morning figuring out what the setups were going to be. And when the camera crew...
Yes, that kind of discipline.
Yeah. When that camera crew came there, he said, the camera goes there, and the actors are there, and get them out of makeup, and let's go, roll them, you know. Mm-hmm. And so he was right on the job. I don't know why he didn't, because the picture was a neat little movie. You know, it was half... The Japanese produced their half of it, and he produced the American half thing. But he did the whole, it was his production altogether. He had the full say about it. He used Tommy Sands, and, you know, his daughter's
husband, then, I think, yeah. Nancy's first husband.
Nancy's first husband, yeah. So then, going and living in Kauai all that time, and just having a ball, you know, that's where he almost drowned, you know. And one of his actor friends saved his life because he was a little plumper, a little more buoyant. Brad Dexter, yeah.
I vaguely remember that.
So he made Brad Dexter a producer after that. If I'd known, you know, I could have saved his life and become a producer. So, you know, living and on location. And then he would let me go if I wanted to do another movie or something, and he wasn't busy, he'd let me go do it. So that's one of the... I went off on the verbal contract and went to Argentina to do Torres Bulba and wasn't ready to do Manchurian Candidate when I came back. So that's when he said, let's pin him down. And then he let me do Raquel Welch's first picture. It was Fantastic Voyage, I guess. It was the first picture here. She'd done something in Europe, I think. And he let me go do Sand Pebbles. And that was a year in China, Taiwan.
How was Steve McQueen?
Oh, great. But difficult, but great. I mean, they weren't difficult with me because if they didn't want to do something, I never pushed it. You know. And he had his own ideas about it. But you knew how to use that. He would ride a water buffalo where he wouldn't sit for portraits, let's say something like that, you know? He thought that was cute, a gag. Or anything to do with motorcycles, he'd do anything he wanted. Off-stage publicity. You know? And
it's interesting. You think there's any connection between the macho quality of some of these guys, like Spencer Tracy and Steve McQueen, that makes them feel that sitting for a portrait is sissy work?
Yes, it is. They feel that. They're not moving, they're not expressing themselves, and they're being directed by somebody they don't even know. Well, in most cases, that's true. You know, a one-time photographer might make them feel terrible. Yeah. But we live with them practically when we're on the set, when, you know. And
talk a little about directing a photograph. I mean, did you direct Harlow, for instance?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Now, give me an example of how you
well, for instance, in this pose, I know what the lights, the pose I'm alluding to is that beautiful gown with a voluminous fluted skirt and the full bosom and the tight waistline, you know? Mm-hmm. Now, I want to show her, but I also want to show the gown, you know? Mm-hmm. And
the hint of the body underneath.
And a hint of the body, which I know how I'm going to light it. But also, after she picked the gown up with her hand and spread it open, then my assistant, I have to tell him, hit that with a cross light to show the fluting, you know. Mm-hmm. And for her to tilt her head a certain way, in keeping. Now, with men, I always had to direct them in some fashion, because they had a tendency to sit back and be relaxed. Well, that shows a double chin, it shows shooting up on the face, a round, broad face looks terrible that way, you know?
Yes.
And a man has to look like we used to call the radiator cap, forging ahead.
The intensity of that.
They had to lean forward most of the time. or grab something, or hold something, or make like doing something.
Now, when you directed them, did you direct them, apart from just physical directions, did you use concepts? Would you
With women, yeah.
Would
With
you
men,
tell her to think about something? Or?
yeah. With men, I never felt I could get away with that. You know, I would never tell Clark Gable what to think about, because he was a pro in the first place. When he's sitting in front of you, he's thinking about something already, and you see it in his face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's looking askance, he's looking off. You can tell him this is looking off into the future, if you dare. You know, or this is in reflection, or this is in retrospect, or whatever. You can give him that general direction, and lean forward. You know, always. I think, I don't know. See him, Nene? Well, he's kind of doing something. And Jerry, these were all candid. There are 4 shots of him, and they all look similar. They all look very handsome. He's never seen them. I did them for Rolling Stone, and then there was a change in thing, and I just forgot about it, you know.
Oh, he's never seen these.
He's never seen them, and they're 4 magnificent shots, if I do say so.
Yes, absolutely.
From the standpoint of not looking like Jerry Lewis, if you want to look like Jerry Lewis.
They look like a handsome leading man.
Yeah, right. And he did a dramatic thing, I understand, on television recently, and the people liked it. And, of course, The King of Comedy, I thought was quite a good picture. I don't know whether you saw it or not.
I did. I liked it.
Okay. Women, you can fantasize a little bit or have them fantasize. You know, come hither, you know, petulant. You just tell them what to do, and then go along. The dialogue goes along with whatever you've indicated.
Right.
You know. So, and where to bend the knee in fashion shots, the upstage knee. You know, it keeps it from being a masculine stance.
Were there any people who just knew how to do it automatically?
Yeah, all the dancers, of course, Tilly Losh, or
Absolutely. That's
you know, and the gal we were just talking about earlier, Eleanor Powell. They know the basic facts that in those days, particularly, shoulders were broad and hips were narrow. You know, and you posed with that in mind, so that that cut down a lot of poses. Nowadays, they fall all over the place, and the clothes are baggy, and they're running and jumping and leaping, and it's interesting. I like it. If I were doing fashions today, I'd do similar action stuff, because it did get to be pretty confining to say bend the upstage knee, you know, and turn the shoulders broad.
It's now returning to exactly that period, though.
Is it?
It's back to glamour again.
Is it? I hope so. Yeah. Maybe I might. As I always tell, you know,
re-enter the field,
interviewers, I always say it's great to be a part of history and be around to enjoy it, you know.
Absolutely.
But, so I'm enjoying it, and I wish, you know, I could tap dance again and do my adagio. I have a collection of pictures that when we're testing strobes and flash globes years ago, we always, I think the one guy that did that most famously was the photographer who did Nixon jumping up in the air and fluttering his feet like a dancer. I've forgotten who that was, a famous photographer. But always before we do a sitting, somebody would jump up in the air and we'd grab an action shot of it. I find myself jumping through heart-shaped things for Valentine's Day, and leaping up in the air to test whether the flash was in sync or not, you know. Harking back to the time which I didn't mention, that I did adagio dancing with a partner for a brief period of time.
You did personally?
Yeah. And I think when two of us did the turnaround with a girl, feet and legs, I think what caused me to quit was I think her face just scraped the floor a little bit when we did the dish rag thing, you know, ring the dish rag. But anyway, I got into photography after that, so dancing. But Tilly Losh, who was a famous dancer, I did some wonderful things of her during the MGM stay, and she said, "You used to be a dancer, didn't you? You're telling me how to dance." I said, "Well, I don't. I'm not telling you how to dance, I'm just making a suggestion." I said, "I'm very flattered that you think that. I hope you mean it." So, what else?
Well, tell me, when you work with someone like DeMille on one of these big, enormous, epic things, whether the crowd scenes with a lot of people and so forth, how much of a direction can you give to keep everything under control as a photographer?
Well, with DeMille, you asked the right question. With DeMille, I didn't have to direct. He sat beside me in the big chair and directed every scene that I did. And he called me in twice a week to do the big scenes. His office would call me whenever they had a big scene to do. And they would try to give me a day of preparation because I used an 11-14 camera, That's a huge camera. He was sold on the idea because I had the big camera and because I was his favorite and only photographer at CBS. So he had me come in twice a week, and he would sit there and direct, and he would say, "Get that wristwatch off of the fellow up there, in that scene there." And he would see it. Out of 1,000 people, he'd see something that wasn't...
Because it was a Bible epic, like Samson and Delilah.
There's a story that I tell usually about working on the Ten Commandments, where he hired me as an actor. I worked with him as an actor in a thing called Unconquered. I was still a ham enough to go out and think maybe I might try to act again after I'd left CBS and a few other places. So he used me as an actor, and then later when he was doing the Ten Commandments, it's a long lurid story. I just lost a movie studio that I was trying to make go for about 5 years, and somebody stole it from me, a corporate thief, which is a long another story. But the fellow had all my furniture. We were down dressing the sets in the last picture I made, which was a feature picture. And he, at that time, decided to lift the whole studio from me. You see it in movies and all that, the dramatic thievery and stealing of corporate. I made him president, so I feel it was my fault. But that was his hobby, stealing corporations. Anyway, I was bereft and didn't have a job, and so I went down to DeMille and told him a little bit. I didn't give him the lurid story, but I said, "I'm broke and I need a job." And he said, "Well, we've been working on the Ten Commandments for a year, and so we don't have any camera jobs. But," he says, "if you're still acting, why, of course I can use you." I said, "Well, I haven't
I'm hungry."
I haven't paid my back SAG dues, but be glad to do it, And I started to walk away because I hadn't paid my dues. And he called his secretary in to find out how much Allan owes SAG. So he did. And he made a check out and paid all my back dues. And said, "Come to work tomorrow morning if you can put in and get some contact lenses so make blue eyes brown." For the picture, I said, "Well, I don't, but fine, I'll try that." So, long story, I got the lenses in. But in speaking about him picking the wristwatch out of the guy up in the crowd, where 1,000 people are milling in and out, and telling the prop man to take that watch away from the guy, Why, he called me over one day and he said, "Look," and I saw this still, and here I'm in the middle of the still standing beside Edward G. Robinson, and my blue eyes are just flashing like mad. And he said, "Allan, where are those contact lenses, And I said, "I got them, but I couldn't wear them, they were killing me." And he said, "Get them back in there, And so he could pick little nits out of epic scenes. And that's why he directed every one of my scenes that I shot stills. He would sit there and tell him exactly what to do, where to put her hand, everything,
Inspector Mature and
Hedy Lamarr, yeah.
See, that was an extraordinary face.
Yeah, it was.
It was extraordinary.
Wasn't it?
Because one of the things that I remember about camera work was the way she was introduced in Algiers. Remember that opening scene where all you see are her lips, and then the light goes up and the camera comes up, and then you see the eyes, the nostrils, the eyes, then the turban, and this extraordinary beauty. And it was like peeling layers of,
That's what a cinematographer tries to do.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
That's what I wanted to apply. I wanted to apply my experience into portraits and control lighting And doing the backstage films never quite did that for me. You know, it was fun doing a little movie. That was the joy of it. A beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
You know, make it make sense, make it look like they were having fun. On the Sinatra films that I did, it looked like they were having more fun than they were, you know, which was a successful way to do these things. Even though the film was just kind of an ordinary. Hey, there's Gene right there.
Fine, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I think
I can use
diet slice.
Diet slice.
Diet slice can't hurt me at all. Thank you, Gene. We're being entertained, and our hostess has just arrived. Just a few more minutes, Ted. I'm very grateful for all this. It's really wonderful. And, well, I think it's fascinating that DeMille would take the time and trouble. And, of course, it's typical of creative people who really feel strongly about what it is they want to produce. Did you ever have anybody who hated the pictures that you took of them? You know, a star that would simply say, these are terrible because they were getting old or they...
only once, and it wasn't because the pictures were bad, it's because they didn't want to pay for them because it was a private sitting. A very famous European actress, and Russell Birdwell, I think it was, the famous publicity man.
Yes, of course, I knew Russell.
Sent her to me, and I thought he was paying for them, and he thought she was paying for them. So the pictures were quite nice, you know. They were very good, as a matter of fact. They weren't sensational, but they were as good as anything I'd ever seen of her, and they were more recent. So all of a sudden...
Who was it? Was it Bergner or...
Huh?
What was it? Yeah.
Jean? Oh, maybe she could...
You can't remember.
I can't remember her name, but
right.
her face is right there, and I think she's still around. I think she recently did a television thing. But anyway, she was she didn't want to pay for them, so she she didn't have to say they were terrible. She said, "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. Forget it."
Well, that's understandable.
Or I'll pay some expense money. No, but nothing. They didn't want. So I think when they want to cut it clean, they just say the pictures are terrible, you know. Mm-hmm. But that's the only... I've been very lucky because I've worked... I'm, unfortunately, the kind of a guy that works all night to do a thing and shows up in the morning and throws them on the table as if this is just easy thing. This is the way it's done. It's just magic, you know?
Yes.
But being a retoucher and an artist... Right. I'm able to deliver that sort of thing without requiring any outside help or assistance. I can do the whole thing, from developing and printing and retouching and delivering.
Who was the easiest face to photograph that you ever photographed?
I guess Lombard, really.
Really?
Yeah, because of her animation and natural exuberance. And when you're ready to shoot, you can hold it. I mean, she seemed to remember the attitude she was purveying, I mean, when in action, and then it would be frozen, and you could get it in a 25th of a second, which I tried to. So during that period of these pictures that you see, it was kind of a half open, close type of exposure. Well, a lot of things can happen in a face during half a second, or a fourth of a second, fifth of a second. So I tried to shoot at 25th of a second, even though the films were slow and the lenses weren't fast, and I managed to get away with it. And then I could push them a little in the developing, you know. So I had to not only direct the retouching, but tell them how to develop these pictures. DeMille, to get back to DeMille, he saw these 11x14s when I brought him in, and of course I built a little stand and a little shadow box to show him on, because it wasn't a little stand, because it was bigger than 11x14, which in a transparency was unheard of. Commercially, they were doing food shots and things like that with 11x14 film, Kodachrome, pure color, no grain. So when he knew he wanted some special type work, and I told him what it was going to be, but he had no way of knowing that these 11x14s were going to be like this, luminous, just glowing. So when he saw the first day's work, you know, DeMille was a very reserved person, but he just was almost speechless. He didn't jump up and down or anything. He was speechless, and he ran out of the room with these two things and showed them to somebody else. He has an assistant or something. So he took this shadow box, I found out, and he would go to the vault. He'd put these in the vault at night. He had all these famous painters doing all these paintings all over his office, and never worried about anything happening to them. But these photographs he put in the vault. And every board meeting of any kind, these long tables, I came in one time and I wondered, they said DeMille is busy in there, and I peeked in through the door. And this board meeting with this long boardroom with all these, the various accountants and money men and everything. And he's at the head of the table with his shadow box doing a slideshow with these 11 or 14 photographs hanging down in front of this ground glass, this opal glass. And I thought, my God, it is important to him. He's making nowadays we can dupe and blow those things up and do the same thing.
Sure.
But in those days it was quite a novelty. And it was the original color, so it was just sensational stuff. Kodachrome. Halfway through the picture they stopped making Kodachrome. Yeah. And I had to go to Ektachrome and later on. I think that print turned out pretty good. I think that was Kodachrome and this is Ektachrome, which in the transparency you could tell a lot of difference, But the big scene there in this two-shot was Ektachrome, which you're looking at. Mm-hmm. So at any rate, the color was so interesting that he, even more so then, sat down beside me and directed every scene, which made me feel pretty much like a big shot. I'm DeMille's cameraman. Well, he hired me for the 10 Commandments finally, and as I said, to be down in the crowd with a movie camera. Now, I'm back to my cinematography finally after 40 years, finally doing cinematography for the biggest producer-director in Hollywood. And that was my idea for the first 2 years. I thought after 3 or 4 years I'd be doing it at Metro, But I got sidetracked, of course. And then CBS was a waste of time, away from achieving my goal,
right,
that is.
Right.
So now, this is what I'm hired to do. The actor behind a post or someplace photographing the crowd in all its, whatever, agony or ecstasy or whatever. Candidly doing this. And Henry Wilcoxon is my director on these little units, So we work out what's to be done before each scene. Well, we keep waiting, and there's no hand camera, VistaVision hand camera. The last day of the picture, the technician comes on the set, and he says, "Here it is, Mr. DeMille." And I said, "There it is, Mr. DeMille." I never got to shoot 1 foot of... It's VistaVision. It was a special camera they were shooting the movie with. And the hand camera wasn't in existence until he ordered it. And now they made it... Since then, they made dozens of them, and they were sold for all these special effects people to use.
It's funny how timing operates in our lives, isn't it?
Yeah. So, my big career... but it saved me from great despair from losing my studio. And I always say he kept me from going to jail because eventually I might have waylaid this character that stole the studio. Because he just stole everything. Took my automobile, took everything. Because I had put all this stuff in the corporation. Of course. My automobile.
One can be victimized, there's no question about it.
All my furniture was at the studio at the time that he called on, And my attorney says, you can't hang around here. If you're going to sue the guy, you have to get out. So I'm on the street, and he's in... Later on, he took it as a tax loss, this character. Millionaire. Plenty of money. Angela Lansbury was playing the lead in the last picture that I produced there. And called Life at Stake, with Douglas Dumbrell and Keith Andes playing other parts in it. And I was very proud of that, but the guy who financed it stole my studio, so I never got a print of the picture.
She's a lovely lady,
isn't she?
Yeah.
Charming?
Yeah.
And
it's
she's
nice
still
that
going
she's having
strong.
this enormous success. And Murder, She
This
Wrote,
was in 1955.
Isn't that amazing?
This was when she didn't have a career and was willing to work in a B picture.
Of course.
but she was great in it, and I photographed her beautifully. I haven't seen her since to talk about it, but you keep thinking someday you'll talk to these people and tell them, you know. I tried it with Myrna Loy, and she didn't know who the hell I was, you know. Because you see them every day or in a movie or something, and you read about them, and you've known them so intimately. I used to go to her dressing room, and we used to have a big time laughing, and I'd working on another picture, and I came over when she was on a picture, and the gags that I made, I was working on this very funny picture with Matey Christian, and it was such a cornball, dramatic, where you got hid sort of dramatic thing, B picture, Metro. And I was having such fun working on it that I came over and was giving her stories, and we were just slapping thighs and everything. It was so funny. Here's Myrna Loy, a very reserved, very conservative actress, hearing about all this goings on the next stage, you know. So when I ran into her at I guess 3 or 4 years ago, at a meeting at the what is it, the producers, Arts and Sciences. I started saying, gee, do you remember? And she thought I was some kook or something. No. Oh, God.
Well, I think one of the things that does happen with all of us in living is that we get involved in projects. Movies are projects, plays are projects, magazine issues are projects, and everybody has a great intimacy at that